Mark chapter 6, verses 30 to 44. Jesus feeds the 5,000. The apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry tour and told him all they had done and taught. Then Jesus said, "Let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while." He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. So they left by boat for a quiet place where they could be alone. But many people recognized them and saw them leaving, and people from many towns ran ahead along the shore and got there ahead of them. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. Late in the afternoon, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the nearby farms and villages and buy something to eat." But Jesus said, "You feed them." "With what?" they asked. "We'd have to work for months to earn enough money to buy food for all these people." "How much bread do you have?" he asked. "Go and find out." They came back and reported, "We have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." Then Jesus told the disciples to have the people sit down in groups on the green grass, so they sat down in groups of 50 or 100. Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, looked up towards heaven and blessed them. Then breaking the loaves into pieces, he kept giving the bread to his disciples so they could distribute it to the people. He also divided the fish for everyone to share. They all ate as much as they wanted, and afterwards the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftover bread and fish. A total of 5,000 men were fed from those loaves. Thanks be to God for this reading.
These central passages in Mark's Gospel take us on a journey with Jesus and his disciples. He's introducing them to the rhythm and style of life of the kingdom. It was interrupted by considering what had happened to the faithful forerunner John the Baptist, executed on a whim by Herod simply for upholding righteousness and truth. The apostles began a tour of Galilee 2 by 2. As they experienced the life and work of the kingdom, further journeys took them to Tyre and Sidon on the Mediterranean coast, and to Caesarea Philippi in the north, and other more cosmopolitan areas. Now they return, gathering around Jesus with some excitement, reporting all that they had done and taught. There were so many people there at that time that the apostles had no time even to eat. Probably some of the crowd were the growing crowd of disciples coming and going around Jesus, because remember, the 12 are now generally known as the apostles since they were sent out, which was what apostle means, sent out 2 by 2. Jesus says to the apostles, "Come by yourselves with me to a quiet place and rest." Boarding a boat, they set off in search of a remote place. In actual fact, this would be about the 3rd or the 4th crossing that they had made at this time in their company with Jesus. Having been recognised and seen leaving, word spread to all the villages. People came running round the lake shore, actually getting to the landing place ahead of the boat. Seeing the crowd waiting, Jesus' heart broke. They were like sheep without a shepherd. Herod was proving a rather useless shepherd. Jesus got right down to teaching many things. And with the crowd before him, is he teaching or is he preaching? Just think for a moment that generally in his ministry, he teaches that they might learn using parables. So that's probably what he was doing with this crowd of people, teaching them in parables. But by this time, it was very late in the evening. It was an isolated place. The disciples, far from resting, were getting anxious, and they spoke up. "Send the people away to search for the area for food." an isolated place. Where could they actually go? It seems a bit frustrating that they hardly know what to do. We can understand their frustration and shock with Jesus' response when he tells them, "You feed the crowd." Rather disrespectfully they answer, "That would take a month's wages. Are we to spend that much on them?" They were learning that ministry was a ministry to both body, mind, and spirit. Calmly, Jesus says, "Go and see what bread you have." It's just organising things a bit. The answer was, as you know, 5 loaves, 2 fish. Enough to do God's will, if it starts in the heart. All of this was taking place very near the time of the Passover. At the Passover, they remembered the miracle of salvation from slavery in Egypt, being sustained in the desert after the Exodus for 40 years. They had a background of knowledge of what it was to be cut off from resources and unable to survive. Again, Jesus quietly says, divide the people into groups to sit on the green grass, and it's explicitly stated as the grass being green. Again, that takes us to the springtime, it takes us to the time of the Passover. So they sat down in hundreds and in 50s. Looking heavenward, Jesus gave thanks. He broke the bread. So much of what is happening here is symbolic for things we know about Jesus. It's almost as if Jesus is looking to the last Passover he had with the disciples, when he met with them in the upper room, and he took the bread and the wine, and he broke the bread. Or after Jesus' resurrection and the establishment of the church, rather than celebrating the Passover, we celebrate Holy Communion. Again, the bread is broken. He gave it to the disciples, who gave it to the people. And it said he did the same with the fish. They all ate and were satisfied. Did the crowd know how little was available? The little group with Jesus and the apostles, knowing what the amount of bread is and the amount of fish, they were unaware that a miracle was taking place. It might have been they had as much food, but no. But whatever happened, and we can't actually claim to have any idea of what actually happened on this occasion, it was enough. They all ate and they were satisfied without really knowing how little had been available. No expressions of amazement and wonder from the crowds. No one comments on it. And the disciples picked up 12 baskets full of leftover broken pieces of bread and fish. It's almost as if this meal, with all these leftovers, was a meal for more than those who were just present. A surfeit. Perhaps enough symbolically for the 12 tribes, or as well as the 12 disciples. And what did the 12 think? What's going through their heads? The number of men who had eaten numbered 5,000, besides women and children. Did the disciples see the significance of all this? Were they aware of the enormity of the awesome situation that had actually taken place? Were they themselves reminded of the first Passover in Egypt, in the history they knew of their people, or the Exodus, being freed into the desert, short of food, manna being provided for them from God, as from the hands of God, the covenant of the commands given at Sinai. All these things that were part of the known history of the people. This is a story of God's provision. God makes possible what seems impossible. Looking back even on my own life, there are times when I've been at my wit's end and you can't imagine how things are going to work out, and the impossible becomes possible simply by faith. God acts with the resources available. Even though they're basic, they seem inadequate, He is fully adequate and fully able to satisfy the hearts, the minds and the bodies of those who are responding by faith to all that the Lord is doing among them. And in a way, that's something we have got to be part of. I was being reminded recently about prayer and the air. We're dependent on air for life and sustenance. We're dependent on prayer for life and sustenance. The air that surrounds us and the prayer that surrounds us, whether it's our own prayer or the prayers of others, that constant circulation of God's love and God's peace and God's blessing. Our Father, we know that you love us and that your love has chosen our path. We would have it so. Help us to be satisfied with your choice of rough and smooth, of time and tide, of sun and shower. May we finish our journey satisfied and with joy. Praise the one who breaks the darkness.